Hi everyone, my name is Britton Klein, Ad Sales Manager, and welcome to this week's edition of Marketing Minutes by Scuba Diving Industry Magazine.
And I'm William Klein, publisher. And if you are a company out there would like to be featured on this show, reach out to Britton or I. We'd love to get you scheduled. So,
right.
Britton, who do we have lined up for today's show?
That's right. So for today, we have a very special guest. We have Howard Rosenstein, president of Fantasea Line, Red Sea Diving Pioneer, NOGI Award winner, and International Scuba Diving Hall of Fame inductee, and author.
Wow.
Howard, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, William and Britton. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well,
It's an
thank
honor
you.
to have
I
you.
think it's the longest title we've had for anybody on the show. So that's a
right.
record and 109 shows. So anyhow, Howard, so Britton, Howard is the father of Red Sea Diving, which is a place very near and dear to my heart. So I can't wait to get into today's show and talk a little bit about it.
Totally. It's going to be a fantastic one. But Howard, just to dive right in, could you tell us a little bit about how you first started in the Red Sea and maybe what were things like back then?
First of all, it was so long ago. I have to really think back to the beginning. But seriously, I started, and it was kind of an unusual start. I was a student, a 21-year-old student, an overseas student at Tel Aviv University, and I went snorkeling on the Mediterranean at a kind of a historic site called Caesarea or Caesarea. And when I was diving, I seriously chanced upon a gold treasure. And I said, oh, this is fun. You know, this might make a good living. So with some of the coins that I found, Roman coins, I ended up taking a diving course. That was back in LA, where I grew up in Los Angeles. And after I finished the diving course, I came back to Israel. Wanted to do some more diving now that I had scuba certified. And I sold some of the coins and followed a dream that I had at the time to maybe open a diving school. So that's how it started. It was kind of, I don't think you've ever had a guest that started a diving school and became an instructor 6 months after he got his basic course.
That's right.
But that's what happened to me. It was what they call it in Hebrew or in chutzpah. You know, it's cheek. So, so that's how it began, and it began on the Mediterranean, on the shore of the Mediterranean of Israel. I opened a diving center, and about 2 years later, I had an opportunity to open up a branch in the Red Sea. It was just opening up the Sinai Peninsula on the Red Sea. At the time, it was under Israeli administration, and now it's back under Egyptian administration after the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. So I spent part of my career in doing it in Israel and part of my career doing it in Egypt. But we can talk a little bit more about that. But that's how it's kind of an unusual beginning.
Cool. Well,
I didn't realize that. It was fascinating.
For us.
Yeah, I know. So how has diving changed and the operators have changed in Sharm? I had the pleasure a few years ago to go to Sharm el-Sheikh, go diving there. I got the ability to go to Dahab through the desert and made the Dahab trek, all completely uneventful, but it was wonderful. In fact, funny story, the Egyptian Secret Service assigned me my own personal bodyguard protection to go to Dahab during the trip, and I didn't think much about it at the time, but it was a little scary for most Americans. But that experience was so amazing and so worth it. I mean, not only did I find Ras Mohammed, State Park, National Park, incredible. The diving where you look up and see Mount Sinai, it was really emotional, but the quality of diving is just unbelievable. And Dahab, of course, is like, the feather on the hat. It was just amazing. So talk to us a little about how it's changed over the years, because I know when you were there, it certainly wasn't the mega resort. I think I counted 500 boats in the marina that were dive boats when I was there. And it wasn't all of them.
So if you just kind of have to just use your imagination, but going back 50 years, I started the operations there in 1972. We were the first diving operation in Sharm el-Sheikh. In the beginning, it was a lifestyle. It wasn't a career. It wasn't a profession. I mean, it wasn't like a business. we loved diving. I grew up with the stories of Jacques Cousteau and watching Sea Hunt, like so many of us, and the great Hans Haas, who's in that picture right there.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
amazing.
Right. Yeah.
yeah. And ultimately, I ended up diving with him, but that's a little later on. So like I said, it was really just, I think for the industry in general, it was just the people that were really excited about diving, and they took, some took diving courses, some just started without diving courses. It was just the dawn of diving, sport diving and diving tourism. Just to give you an idea, when I started my business, they just finished the road that goes along the Sinai shore. There was no way to really go except for on a dirt track before that. And when I got to Naama Bay, where the diving centers are, where we set it up, they just dumped an old wooden train car, literally from World War I, on the beach. The floor was sand. And I had a little compressor and a few tanks, and I had a boat that was basically a pregnant surfboard with an outboard motor, an army Jeep, that from the Salvation Army type thing, Army surplus Jeep. And we even had a camel that would pull the Jeep out of the sand if it ever got stuck. So
Oh, wow.
that's how things started. And sometimes we'd wait maybe a week for a tourist to show up, or we would start giving courses ourselves and teaching, because we had to really create the market.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was. And I don't think today, somebody with such meager resources that I had, in fact, at the time, all the gold coins, as you can see here, did help out, could really pull off an operation like that. It took quite a few years. And it became a business. And ultimately, I moved into the Liveaboards, and I built a big diving center in Sharm. And more diving centers came later. And then after 1982, when Israel returned the Sinai to the Egyptians, then a lot of international money came in, and many diving centers, hotels, boats, like you described, that you saw on your trip. So it's a genesis. We were there in the beginning, and today I don't think I would recognize even where my diving center is anymore on the beach in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so there was no books to read how to run a diving center. We learned on our back, by making every conceivable mistake. I'll give you an example. You talked about it being a little strange to have a guard with you when you were there, William. So our first American group came in 1972 from a company called Bay Travel. At the time, it was one of the leading dive travel companies, and one of the few and leading. And the American group that came, we waited for them at the airport, the local airport, when they came down. Half of them were wearing like steel helmets, like
sheesh.
helmets, because
Yeah.
they felt like they were coming into a war zone. And in fact, it wasn't far from the truth, because the war had just ended 2 years before that. So there was still some terrorist activities, which has been kind of a theme. I used to envy my colleagues in the Caribbean and Australia and other areas, because they didn't have some of the challenges that we had, because every time we would build up the business, all of a sudden something would happen on the security side, and we'd lose everything, and then we'd have to start all over again. So we had additional challenges that often you didn't find in other locations. We basically turned a historic battlefield, a battleground, into an international playground for scuba diving in the course of a generation. And I think that's one of the significant achievements that we're quite proud of.
Oh, that's amazing. And before we move on to the book, I do have to tell you, Britton, one of the most amazing experiences I had was on Mike's Reef at about 100 feet, seeing a red bioluminescent sea anemone.
Wow.
And, you're down there. Of course, there's no colors because unless you have a light. This was during the day. And this thing just stood up like a beacon on the side of that coral wall. It's really spectacular. In fact, I was looking, because there's so much tourism, I was looking for signs of, damage, and maybe it was where they took us to, but everything was incredibly healthy, incredibly prolific and preserved. And so it's really an amazing place. So it's amazing that you were the pioneer there, which leads us into our next topic.
Right. Yeah, definitely makes my bucket list. But your book, Treasures, Shipwrecks, and the Dawn of the Red Sea diving, it covers so much of the history of the region, but I'd love to know some of your favorite parts of the book, and maybe how long it even took you to write it.
Oh, that's a great question. So, all these years I was out on the boats. I was a dive instructor and a dive guide for many, many years, and I was in the field. And usually when we were on the boats, and especially when we were running the liveaboard operations, you'd sit around the evening, give slideshows, talk to the guests, and tell stories. And frequently the people say, you got to write a book, because you had all of these adventures, and I had some pretty famous people diving me, like Buzz Aldrin, Barbara Walters, Eugenie Clark,
Leonard
Earle,
Bernstein,
Bernstein, the conductor. I mean, Amos Nachum.
There's Amos.
Yeah, and I had all of these interesting and famous people there. So they said, you got to write a book. And I said, look, I don't have time to write a book. I'm too busy out there working and diving. And it was but I would take notes. And I had a little kind of a notebook that I put on the side. And if something interesting or unusual would happen, then I would, just jot down a line to it and say, hopefully someday I'll remember the whole thing and I can write about it.
Yeah. And
it was only during the COVID pandemic. You remember that? That was a few traumas ago. I had time, because the diving and everything else, and we also had a business that we started called Fantasea Line, which is underwater housings and underwater photo equipment. Things were flat. So my wife and I pulled out the old cartons and cardboard and the old VHS video and the slides, which we had to digitalize, and all these things. And I just pulled out that old book that I was keeping notes on. I started putting these little adventures together.
Wow.
And luckily, on the first crack, I found a publisher called Dived Up Publications in the UK, who are very experienced and very good in this. And he said, I want this book. We're gonna do this together. So I just started sending him chapter by chapter. David Doubilet, who started his career diving with me in Sharm el-Sheikh, one of his very first assignments for National Geographic in 1974. He was kind enough to donate some beautiful, beautiful images. There's over 200 original images in the book.
Oh, wow.
David wrote the foreword, as did Dr. Sylvia Earle, who was a hero of our industry and of the whole ocean world. So Sylvia was really kind enough to write a foreword for the book. So it's kind of a condensation of adventures and stories that are not only diving, because at the time, like I hinted, there were other things going on, the diplomacy, a peace process, a lot of famous celebrities coming and diving, and each one I had, like I said, Hans Haas, who was one of my childhood heroes, who dove with me. And weird and strange stories. We discovered a few shipwrecks, like the Dunraven shipwreck out of Sharm near Ras Mohammed. With Dr. Eugenie Clark and David and others, we made a big drive to turn Ras Mohammed into a nature reserve and a protected area. And then worked on getting the Egyptians to follow up and make it their very first national park and nature reserve. I took a dive. You mentioned St. Catherine's, Mount Sinai. Did you mention that, William?
I did, yes.
Yes, sir.
So I was the first person in 2,000 years and the last person in 50 years. 50 years ago exactly, I was asked to do a dive into the well, the Bedouin well at St. Catherine. There's a chapter of it in the book. It's actually pretty funny, but also was a little scary. But I had to go into this deep well to extract the water pump. So I think I'm the only person in the history of Mount Sinai. I don't know if Moses did any diving.
I doubt he did any diving.
That's so cool.
So anyway, I think there's I don't know if you have that picture, but it's a great picture of me standing around with.
I think it's in the slideshow.
Yeah, it's in the slideshow.
Cool. So
anyway,
how deep was that well?
So what happened is they had a flood, and the flood took a lot of debris and stones and boulders and wood and whatever down into and just screwed up the whole system. I had to I was lowered down on a rope with a pulley, and luckily they pulled me back up with a Jeep on a rope with a pulley.
Nice.
I had to go down I'd say about 30 feet once I got to the water line, and it was a tight thing, and it was crystal clear. The water was crystal clear when I got in, and I didn't wear fins, but as soon as I started messing around with it, and I had to cut the lines and everything, all of a sudden all the silt came up. So basically I finished the dive with all these hoses and lines and wires, and just in the dark with my feeling, and I got tangled up, and I had to use a knife. I thought I was going to end my diving career in Mount Sinai in a Bedouin well. I mean,
that was a pretty risky environment, that's for sure.
Yeah. It was pretty stupid of me, I must say. I learned a lot since then. I was pretty cocky and confident as a young man.
That's still an amazing adventure. So if you're a retailer out there listening or a dive pro and you'd like to get a supply of these books, reach out to Howard. Right. His email address will be in the closing credits of this show, and get a hold of him. I believe you said the website address was diveup.com. Is that correct for your publisher?
Okay. So our dedicated dive website to order online and get a autographed copy of the book is actually it's got a funny name, but it's www, and you can put it on your notes afterwards.
Sure.
Yam Olam, YAMOLAM. It's Hebrew for SeaWorld. YamOlam.com. But you could put that on, and also we have a dedicated email, which is books at Fantasea, which is my company, Fantasea, FANTASEA, like C in the end,
right.
.com. And either way, we'll give you a nice, if they mention that it comes from this podcast, then we'll give you a nice discount as
How about that? Well, that's great. And we'll make sure we get that in the comments section. Howard, this has just been a great interview. We've got one more question before we go.
Absolutely. So lastly, just to close this out, what is your favorite location in the Red Sea to dive, or maybe even one of your just most memorable locations?
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble, right? So we started diving in Ras Mohammed in 1972, and we would go there, and we would be the only ones there. I had Dr. Eugenie Clark, who was my mentor and my dear friend, who she had a birthday in heaven. She's unfortunately no longer with us, the shark lady, and she was on assignment with National Geographic, with David Doubilet and Anne Doubilet, and this was the big opening of the Red Sea to the diving world. And it was a cover story in 1975, September, National Geographic. And we had the Ras Mohammed to ourselves. And we were there for literally weeks, diving day in, day out. And we witnessed the first time ever, that's what Jeannie said, the actual mating of sharks. We saw the mating of reef sharks at Ras Mohammed. And I mean, I don't want to be like a voyeur or something, but we enjoyed, it was very exciting. I'll keep it for young people. I won't talk about it so much, but it was really
what an adventure.
Exhilarating on the wall at Ras Mohammed, the sheer drop off, and we're just right there hanging off a cave and watching the sharks mating just right in front of us.
That's amazing.
Incredible.
Amazing.
Wow. Thank you for that little nugget.
Howard, thanks again. Yeah, it's been a great show, Brett. And this is going to be one for the books, don't you think?
Absolutely.
So go to our website, scubadivingindustry.com. You can see links to all of our podcasts as well as this show. We're also, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can check this out and all the others we got out there. But Howard, again, thank you for a great, great show. And I think that's going to probably wrap us up for the day, Britton.
That's right.
Any last comments, Howard, before we close here?
Just thank you. It was great, and I'm glad that we had this opportunity, and you gave me this opportunity to tell my story. So all the best to you, and keep on the great work.
Well, thanks a lot. That's good. Yes,
and I'll be at the DEMA to hopefully get a NOGI.
Oh, that's right. We'll see you there. We have a booth there. In fact, we're doing live broadcasts every day for the show. We call it On the Road at DEMA. So maybe we'll drag you into our booth and do a little update.
Yeah,
too. For a replay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
thanks again. Okay, that's going to do it for us, folks. Come check it out. See us online and check out the latest issue that's out right now.
That's right.